Call this meeting to order. For a budget workshop, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could I ask everybody to remain standing for a moment of silence for the tragedy that took place in Broward County, Florida, in several up to 18 people were deceased and killed by needless gunfire. Thank you. We're going to start this evening's budget presentation with the high school and with Mr. Papone.
If I could just take a moment to kick us off, Mr.
No,
President?
absolutely not. Okay.
So tonight, Dr. Corey from Ulster BOCES is going to be here. He should be rolling in here at any minute. He's going to give us a little overview like he does every year of the Ulster BOCES programs. I'd also like to point out that in each of the buildings, there are some line items that I'd like to start off by addressing tonight. They'll be at the end. What we've asked each building to do is plan on field trips for each grade level without anyone having to fundraise for those grade levels, for those field trips, so you're going to see some increases in there. We're going to be fine-tuning that going forward. We don't know exactly the total dollar amount, what each field trip is going to cost in future years, so you may see adjustments up or down depending on what happens this year, but you will see that in each of the building budgets. Then also at the end of each of the three buildings, you're going to see a couple lines going up and down regarding contractual and BLT orders. In the past, what I've done is I've carried that number going forward and made adjustments accordingly each year. But this year what I did was I actually went through and I counted the number of instructional staff in each building and applied the $100 or $125 BLT or contractual dollars. So you may see increases or decreases in those lines, and that's what is causing those increases or decreases. And I'd also like to report that the Chromebooks have arrived. Okay. It takes some time to get them out and get them into the buildings, but we hope to have them out within a couple of weeks. It's not just as simple as opening it up and handing it out. There's some prep that goes with the carts that they go in for charging and configuration with our network, but Moses and Sarah are working pretty hard to get them out as quickly as they can.
And how are they going to be deployed? First, out to the 6th grade, out to special ed? Which way? How are we doing?
I believe so. I don't know the exact order. It's going to be in the grades where we have the need. I know that we identified a couple of classrooms that were short. We'll go out there first and then out to special ed, the self-contained. So Moses has, he has an idea of what the needs are instructionally, and he'll get them out, accordingly.
We are starting with 6th grade, and Moses did speak to me today, told me that they're making sure they have the inventory right and the computers are logged into the right parts. So it's just going to they want to make sure it's done and done right, but they're on it. Actually, he's here tonight working on it, and they'll be working on it for the balance of this week and early next week.
So we're looking at a couple of weeks for all of them to be out, but some of them could be out sooner.
That's correct.
So we're clear on that.
So I'm going to bring up Mr. Proponent first, and what I've asked each presenter tonight to do is to focus on just the lines where there's a substantial increase or decrease. That should get us through each budget presentation pretty quickly, and then feel free to ask any questions on those line items or any other line item. Yes, sir.
So I'm just going to excuse you for a second. Since Dr. Corey's traveled a distance, we're going to have him go first.
Absolutely, that's fine.
District superintendent trumps everybody.
We're going to give him a minute to collect himself and then come on up.
Thank you.
You're welcome,
What
Dr.
page,
Corey.
Vince, are you?
He doesn't have a page.
No, but you're going to go up there and, right? You have to put it up, the BOCES budget? BOCES 191. Page 29, so they're going to have questions about the lines.
of the BOCES, but this is, there was more.
So this is our, outside of special education, this is our BOCES budget. It's a pretty dense document to have up on the screen. Dr. Corey will address any items that you specifically have questions on here, but he's going to give an overview of his BOCES programs as well.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's always better for me to come and hear your questions directly. When we develop pricing for BOCES, we do that in the October-November timeframe. And so there's a lot of assumptions that we make. We have to, because our budget different than your budget, we have to collect all of our revenue in each of the separate lines because we can't move money from one COSR to another. It all has to be self-contained. And so we had to project pension contributions. We have to project utility costs because those utility costs are not a separate line like in a component budget. They're all inside the COSRs. We have to project health benefit increases, the premium increases, and so we were back in the October-November timeframe projecting, like in health benefits, I think we used a 13% factor for a premium increase. And then, some of the numbers have come out. I think I read TRS was 10.5 or 10.3. I think we projected like 11 something as a TRS increase. So all of our budget numbers are based on that assumption that we had in October, November. The positive side for that is because we probably are conservative on the high side, monies that are left over in the COSR are refunded to the district. And I think, in talking not just with Vince, but in all area business officials, they like it that way because we typically we have never, not in my 7 years, and I believe in my predecessor's time, ever changed our prices mid-year. If we underestimated and didn't have enough money to cover expenses, we'd have to come to the districts and say, we know you bought X amount of this particular COSR, we don't have enough money to cover, so we're going to have to increase the prices. We've never done that. And so by estimating on the high side, and then, and then at the end of the year, refunding whatever's left over, it's safe for the districts, and every district business official that I've talked to likes it that way. It's also a safety valve because that refund comes in the next calendar year. And in the past, several years ago, when the revenues for the state weren't sufficient, the governor threatened to reduce state aid to schools at mid-year. So because the law requires in New York State that school districts operate with a balanced budget, if they were to suddenly reduce state aid to a school district because of a shortfall in revenue, you would have a hole to fill. That refund, my understanding is the business administrators like the refund because that potentially is a way of filling a hole that could happen if the governor ever reduced state aid because of a revenue shortfall on the state side. And if not, it's money that becomes part of your fund balance that you can use. I think everybody budgets about $250,000 or so, anticipating a refund of about $250,000, and anything above that would be money that you could then devote to a program or even an account or a reserve account at that point in time. Probably the biggest line item that went up would be in administration. And it's not a COSR, it's not one that you can choose to participate in, but it has to do with the part of our administrative budget that pays for retiree health benefits. I believe the number was in the 65 to 70% increase. I don't know if it's on...
Yes, it's on line number 2 of their budget.
Page 29.
Page 29, line number 2, and our cost went up $109,389.
Yep, 35.6%, yep. That's your share of our overall piece. And let me explain that significant increase. Earlier this year, I presented to the Ulster BOCES board the demographics of our staff. We have an aging staff, like most everybody else does. And so The law requires, or commission regulations require, that we pay for post-retirement health benefits through our administrative budget. We again have to project how many people are going to retire in the next year. We have known retirees, and then we have to project how many new retirees there'll be. We look at a 5, 10, and 15-year trend of the age of the people at Ulster Boces who have retired. And whether you look at 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, I think it's 62 is the age that people retire. Sometimes it's 62.2, sometimes it's 61.7, but it averages out 5, 10, and 15 years at 62. So what we budget as if everybody who is currently employed at the age of 62 will retire. Some people retire at 55. I've got 4 employees who are 70, okay? They're still not retired. The average age is 62. We then look at our current retirees and then any potential new retirees, and because our staff is aging, we have this big blip this particular year. You see a 35+% increase, and that's all due to post-retirement benefits, health benefits for our retirees. Last year, total bill for retirees was about $1.8 million. The known retirees, the people who we know are retired, okay, that bill will jump to $2.5 million for this upcoming year, and then when we add the people who are currently actively employed who hit 62, it jumps to $4.1 million. That's the increase that you see. If the people don't retire, the excess funds that are collected will be refunded to you. In fact, this year, all of those funds will be refunded to you because we are drawing down our OPEB account, and we'll do so all of next year and then half of the following year. And then that OPEB account will be extinguished. We were directed to do that by the controller when we were audited, I think in 2008 or 2009. And so whatever monies we collect will be refunded to you, and then the following year about half a year's worth. All of our other programs, we kept our prices in the 1% to 2% range in terms of growth. Some of them are 0. Some of them are COSERs that only involve a single person. Some of them may be a little bit higher that don't involve people, but they're subscription services where you're buying a subscription and the vendor has increased the prices. And so we don't have any control. Your control is to purchase it or not purchase it if it's something that's as utility for you all in the district. So I'd be happy to answer any specific questions about a line, but the big bump I think is that administrative piece. If you took out the retiree health care costs out of our administrative budget, the resulting administrative budget actually was reduced by about $100,000 or $150,000. So our non-retiree health care costs came down about $100,000 and $150,000.
Thank you, Dr. Corey. Are there any questions from the board?
I do have a question, Mr. President. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Corey. Thank you for coming this evening. And you may have already answered this question. Forgive me if you did. I'm trying to wrap my head around quite a few concepts here.
Sure.
How is the allocation from Ellenville School District determined?
On administration, it's on the percentage of students. It's called our WADA, your resident weighted daily average daily attendance. Basically, to put it simply, it is the percentage of students that you have compared to the whole county. Roughly 10%, maybe a little bit more or less, I think is, yeah, I'd have to look at the exact WADA number, but so let's assume there were 2,000 students in the Ellenville School District and there were 20,000 in the county. You would be 10%, you would get 10% of the charge on the administrative budget. Yes.
So,
on the COSERs, it's your level of participation. You can buy as much or as little of a COSER as you want.
okay, great.
And if you look at the COSERs, sometimes it's in different units. So just for instance, if you look at the alternative education, the unit price is per student. Same thing with career tech, same thing Wherever you see per student, wherever you see RWADA, that's the resident weighted average daily attendance. Then you can, like grant coordination, we pay per day. So let's say we buy 10 or 20 days of grant coordination, we would pay by the day. So it's different units for different COSERs.
The formula is different for every unit.
A different COSER, depending upon what the service is.
So where I see district, Madam Superintendent, is our WADA a factor?
Our WADA is a factor, but it's not just our WADA, it's a percentage of our WADA to the rest of the county.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Is our WADA based on attendance, or is it based on registered students?
It's a long.
It's a very, we can give you a little booklet of all of the formulas and state that has, Chuck probably has the most updated one, although I think they hide that up there, we don't really get them.
When I go out publicly, rather than trying to explain the formula, basically, Kingston has about 30% of the population in the county, so their WADA number is right around 30, and then I say everybody, the other 7 districts are roughly 10% each. If they're a little bit smaller, like an Ontiora, it's probably down around 7 or 8. If they're a little bit larger, like a Wallkill or Saugerties, they're probably 12 or 13, and everybody else is kind of centered around that. So it's the easiest way for me to explain it, and there's a fairly complex formula to figure it out. I try not to be too complex.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews?
Dr. Curry, a couple of questions. I'm really interested in you explaining IEP Direct, lines 48 through 52. Seems to be a lot of small cost involved in that. But basically 48 through 52 are various components of IEP Direct.
Yes. Yeah, IEP Direct is a software program that manages the IEPs for your district. It's a subscription service, and then we provide support for that, so help desk support, connectivity, licensing fees, etc. That's a vendor cost. That's just a pass-through for us.
Okay, so specifically talk about the licensing maintenance, greater than 99 students, and then also the line above that, maintenance above 200 students. So if we had 98 students, we wouldn't pay maintenance, is that what that's saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Where are you,
Yes.
Mr. Matthews?
Which
Well, I'm specifically looking at
Page 28.
the difference between 50 and 51.
Page 28 for the board in front.
So we pay per student greater than from 99 to 199. Looks like we're paying $230 per student, and then when we crest over 200, we're paying
I think
a
for
flat fee.
the first, I have to get the information for you.
Yeah, I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure the way that reads is that
First 200.
for the first 200, there's a cost, and then for every 99 above that 200,
there's an incremental cost.
correct, for every 99 students, there's a cost. So if there's 300, and then there's 400, so you add that cost of 99 on. I'll double check that. I'll pull out the book.
Pretty sure that's right.
So from 1 to 200 is a flat fee of $6,900.
Yes.
Right.
And then for each student above,
It's $8.25, it looks like.
858.
Or $8.58, last year was $8.28, yeah.
Yeah, and those are passed through from the vendor.
yeah.
It's just software.
Which makes sense. We're probably with our pre,
We have
Please,
roughly
CPSA,
340
that's
students.
CSA, plus pre-SB, plus
CPSA.
CPSA, plus 504 that tracks it too, we're probably over 400.
Okay, so to get an answer, the difference between base support and maintenance? Just a question.
Sure. Base support you have to buy anytime you use any particular product.
Yes.
So, and then on top of that, there are other charges, whether there's a per unit charge, whether it's a licensing charge, but in order to get into any COSER, you always pay the base cost for that COSER, and then any additional above that is, of course, is going to be added on.
Yeah.
Do we have any cost with IEP Direct in-house? Or is everything IEP direct?
I think we manage the whole.
Dr. Curry and
Yeah.
Moses?
Yeah, we manage, so all the security, the updates are done on our site, and then you log into that site.
It's a web-based management of all our IEPs.
Okay, so we're not going to see any line items of this IEP, correct?
No, only in this budget.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board?
Yeah, I had a second question. I'm trying. Okay, let's go back to line item 141. I'm on page 31. Line 141 seems to be a new service. If somebody could speak to that, please.
That's our absence management system, or it's called ASAP. That's the automatic,
They call it
electron.
for substitute, processing substitutes. It's electronic,
We added that
basically.
this year.
Yeah.
Okay, how did we pay for that this year?
We had a budget line for the person who was actually making the calls. So that was our substitute caller. It was an actual payroll budget code. And when we switched to the BOCES code, that money came out of the payroll code and moved over to the BOCES budget line item.
Okay, so we're not going to see that in our budget then?
We won't see it in the
You
payroll.
won't see, right, you won't see if you took a position out of your budget, it's now in that position is now paying for the ASAP software.
And it's aidable,
Yes.
so we'll get paid back on this.
Is this a different system that we're currently using?
No, it's a system that we're using right now.
Okay, very good, because I know that there was a little trepidation on startup. I just don't want to see us starting a new system.
No,
The same.
it's the same system. It was not in the budget for this year because we didn't know we were going to move to the automated system until this summer.
Okay, as Mrs. Osterhout would say, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Any further questions from the board?
I do have a question, Mr. President. Trustee Burns, did you have a question? I'm sorry, I jumped in front of you.
Go ahead.
Where would I find in the BOCES budget, or this portion of the budget, funds for new programs?
What do you mean funds for new programs you want to add?
Yeah.
This is the time to do it now if we want to add it. So we don't have a separate line that says new programs.
We don't, okay. Do we have any new programs that we plan on adding?
Do you have one that you are interested in?
Whatever ones there's a demand for.
Well, sometimes BOCES will create a new coaster. There's a,
Right now, we're looking at, just so that you.
actually, why don't you talk about the human resource coaster? We haven't gotten any, that's like a new program they're offering.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Dr. Porter. When I say new program, I mean one that we were going to offer here on campus. We've been talking about bringing programs to
You mean a
the
special
Oh, you're talking
education
about
program?
Either special ed or like the CNA program
Okay.
or
That
New
could be
Vision's
offered
help.
here in
Right.
Ellenville.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
I
Am I
mean-
off topic, Vince? Is that what you're saying? This is for special ed specifically, not?
No, this is,
No,
No,
You're good.
you're fine with that. We just didn't know what the
Like what-
question was.
yeah, if there was a demand for, a particular program that we presently didn't offer, but we could offer here, and I know Lisa and I have talked many times about finding space for programs. Like we have the health career option here, the nursing option, and we could offer certain courses here in your school. The problem has always been one of finding space.
And students.
And students, right, the combination of, and we've underwritten programs where where a local district probably wouldn't start a program with under 15 students because we can spread the cost around the entire county. We might seed the program with 7 or 8 students and then watch it build over time. And so we're always looking for, in fact, I think our principal, our teachers, I know our P-Tech teacher was out, our principal was out visiting the schools, talking about our programs. Not sure how they do it here in Ellenville. Every district does it a little bit differently. And if kids came to us, or guidance counselors came to us, or administrators came to us and said, we wish we had program X, we would look to build that program.
As we did with the New Visions program, years ago, we had many students that wanted to be involved in New Visions. We had it here for a few years, then the enrollment really dropped for us. So for other schools to send students here when we had none, didn't make a lot of sense for them, so we lost it for a year, but this year it's back. In addition to New Vision's Health, we also have the CNA, Certified Nurse Assistant Program, that's here now too. But we're always talking about what new programs can be offered here. So there's not a general cost to us for that.
Okay.
We would purchase
Seats.
seats.
That's right.
And then if you go to line 10, that's Career Tech.
Which page, ma'am?
Sorry, you're on page 29, line 10. So that's Career Tech. That's all the Career Tech programs. When the board did their visit, both at Sullivan and Ulster, BOCES, those are the seats we have. And there's a booklet. Did we give the board the booklet of all the services?
No.
So we'll put that in your next packet so you can see all the services that are offered, but those are the seats. If it behooves us in BOCES to have it here, and we could fund it here, we wouldn't pay extra for it.
In fact, you'd probably be
we-
renting space from
That's right.
you. Yeah, and so you get some revenue for that. One of the programs that the county superintendents have come to us, the individual component superintendents have come to us because there's been an influx of non-English speaking students to the county. I just was visiting the Orange Ulster program. They have a transitional ENL academy where students come to one of their sites and basically they may stay for 5, 6, 7 months doing language acquisition before they can transition back. We just recently went into a lease agreement with Kingston and leased their Anna Devine School. And so we're looking at creating that same academy. My concern was always the law requires those students have to be integrated into a regular program. We are moving our P-TECH program to the Anna Devine site, and so the possible levels of integration are there. If that was the only program in a building, I don't believe it would be legal to keep those kids in that program. And so we're looking at the possibility to meet a need in the county of opening up an ENL transition program so that kids who come in who have absolutely no English speaking skills could come in and stay for a month, 6 months, up to a year, and usually they transition back. I asked about the research, and because they've gone through this program for about a year, they had 7 or 8 kids in their first year, which was last year. All of those kids have transitioned back to their home districts. All of them are doing C+ or better academically in regular classrooms. So it's just that when they come in and you try to meet their needs in a regular high school environment, let's say it's a high school-based program, it's hard for teachers and staff to meet those needs, where it's better if we were to do it. It would be probably too small of a population for any single district to do it, but that's why BOCES is around to do it collectively. We also recreated the alternative school. I think you have a couple kids in our alternative school up at the Anna Devine site. We call it the Phoenix Academy, and so that's off to a good start as well.
Mr. Burnward.
Yes, Dr. Corey, I hope I'm not oversimplifying things here, but if you could explain to me what Ellenville paid BOCES in 17-18, what you anticipate we'll be paying in 18-19, the percentage change.
When I visited last time, I didn't bring that sheet with me. Vince, do you remember?
I have it, we have
We've been
it.
pretty consistent in the...
If you go to page 31, on line 154, there's 2 lines here on line 154 for everything other than special education in 17-18 this year, we have budgeted $2,837,772. It's going up to $3,006,992 for a $169,220 increase, of which $109,000 is that administrative cost that we saw a little bump up in.
Right.
But the bottom line number, where you see the total BOCES budget, from $6,287,532 to $7,548,025, that difference, the delta between that, or the difference between that, is the special education BOCES budget,
Right.
which is the previous pages. So we had more We had a decrease in private placement enrollments into public placement enrollments. So we break the BOCES budget down into all other BOCES programs other than special ed and then special education. You don't get BOCES aid on special education costs. You get BOCES aid on all the others.
Mr. Bruce, you
Is
have
that
another question?
is that number 20% increase for the total budget?
Total BOCES and other.
And and a large part of that is the administrative cost for the post-retirement benefits, $100,000+.
So if you look at on page 28, if I can take you to page 28, on the summary of the BOCES special education costs, those numbers, if you look at that number, it went from $3,449,761 to $4,541,033 for $1 million difference there on the BOCES placement. And if you go to page 27, you can see what programs went up and what programs went down. So you can see, if I can just take you to line 36, the BOCES placements, that's where the number went up. And if you go line by line, you can see that the 112.1, task academic prep went up a placement. And you can see just going down there which placements. I can take you down to the Orange County BOCES 913 COSER. That went up $395,730.93. And the OC, which is Orange County BOCES 612 budget, that went up $670,000 for the bulk of it. You can see we went from 3 students placed there to 7 students placed there. Dr. Fogarty and Mrs. Foglia Edwards is going to talk about why we couldn't create classes here for those 4 students and how what the span and the age span is and what the individual needs are. So they'll cover why those placements changed in their presentation.
Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to revisit vocational courses here on campus, then do we have any courses and/or programs that have been proposed for the campus?
New programs from
Yes.
BOCES? Not for next year, that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a carpentry program that's running down the road in Rhino Valley. So that could cut some transportation costs down if you were to send students to that carpentry program. It's a half day. I think it could be varied AM or PM. Right now it's just, I believe it's in the PM.
Dr. Fogarty, can I ask, do you track placement for graduates of the vocational programs?
Absolutely.
And overall, if you have the number?
I don't remember the exact percent. A number of them go on to 2-year colleges. A number of them go right to work. A small percentage go into the military.
But
I can get you the exacts. Yeah.
do an overwhelming majority of them do something productive?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Thank you, Dr. Corey. One more question. I got another question.
Yeah, just one more question, Dr. Curry. On line item 7, which for my fellow board members is page 27, is this a new program developed for 1819?
What page?
So, Mr. Matthews,
27.
Ms. Fogarty Edwards is going to address that. That's a special ed program where we probably don't have any students in that, currently in that program, or it may be something that currently Fisher Mears has created specifically for students that that have that need.
Are you talking about the total Orange BOCES line?
No, Life Employment Development Program class, it looks like we didn't participate in 17 and page 27, line 7. And we look like 2 students are going to participate.
It's not a new program.
At 60.
It's not a new program. It's one that we've had. It's just been retitled to reflect more what actually happens in the program.
But we have 2 students
Yeah, 2
that's going
students.
there this year that we did not have in that program last year.
Yep, that's right.
Was it were the 2 students in the other titled program last year? It's hard to say.
It's hard to say.
We could find out. It's
I'm seeing a head shake of yes.
Yes,
From the
yes.
They were in a BOCES program, but not that.
not that program. Right.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Dr. Corey. As always, a wonderful presentation, and we look forward to working with you on matters of mutual concern.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Corey.
Thank you, Dr. Corey.
It's up to you.
All right, so we're going to continue with special education at this point.
Might as well, we started.
Sorry, Mr. Babone, you got bumped.
Yeah, I'm being told that's where we should go.
I didn't say that, I said it was up to you to go where you wanted to go. I did not. It was my fault. So I just want to tell you what pages you're on. You're on page, yes, 23, and it goes all the way to the end of 28. And there's a PowerPoint presentation.
We have a brief PowerPoint just to kind of give you an overview of where things are at thus far. So I know Dr. Fogarty was going to start with the first screen.
Okay, now, some of the questions that you were asking, we had ourselves said, what would the board ask us when we start to talk about increases and different things? So we sat down and we said, I think to explain how numbers change from one year to the next gets specifically difficult for us to project, just like BOCES, that everything's going to stay static. So what we decided to do was to take a moment in time from one year to the next. Now, you have this chart as the first one in there. This is like every board meeting, you get an update on the number of students and where they are. This really is on the chart. This section is on that chart. So we chose February 1st, 2017 versus February 1st, 2018. So as you look at that, you'll see that in essence, the total numbers did not change. You look right there. Now, isn't that amazing? You still have 343 each year. Now, the problem is, if you look at these lines, right here, and you notice that Ulster BOCES, we had 19 students. You go across here, this year, right now, we have 15. Orange Ulster, right now, 24. Orange Ulster, 17. Sullivan, 8. 6. Rockland doesn't exist. It's last year at this time. And now, this year, there are 3 students. Now, the reason why we wanted to show you that is that when students move around from one projection to another, and also we're going to have there's another sheet in this presentation which shows the number of students who came in, who transferred in, who were BOCES students, and how many of them had to be placed out of the district. Some of them we were able to incorporate in the district, some of them we were not. So if you're looking at that chart, you start to see that the numbers may not have changed, but where the students are attending school has. And the programs, like the Rockland program, we had nobody in there last year. One student came out of our residential facility, and the only place where we could find was in Rockland BOCES. Another student who lived originally up, I think up in the Nyack area, moved to Ellenville, and based on pendency and everything, he stayed in the Rockland BOCES. And then we had another student who was a hard-to-place student. And all these students, by the way,
when we say hard to place or came out of a residential facility, we go through the other BOCES, the closest BOCES. We go through Ulster BOCES, we go through Orange Ulster, we go through Sullivan. The only one that accepted these 3 students was the Rockland BOCES. And you see down here, we have in other districts last year at this time, we had 2 students. One of those students, based on CSE, et cetera, we had to find a placement in the BOCES. So you move from an in-district program, which is at a lower cost to us, pay the district rate or whatever that district is, and the student was placed in the BOCES program over here. So when you start to look at the numbers, it's very hard to compare because, for example, the program in the Orange Ulster BOCES is much more expensive because of the service levels that that child needs than in the Ulster program, okay? Because some of the BOCES have certain programs, some, as you know, some of them do not. So we go always through our Ulster BOCES first, and then we move on to the other programs. But there are going to be times when we cannot get placement because specifically they don't have the programs as close. So we start working out from Ulster and working out through Sullivan, Orange Ulster, and in this case, Rockland. But we actually had asked for those students, Northern Westchester BOCES and Southern Westchester BOCES before we even hit Rockland. So that's a quick run through on some of the types of numbers that, even though the numbers are stayed the same, the positions don't stay the same. The kids move, they change, and the service levels change.
So Dr. Fogarty, with that being said, and the numbers being the same, what is increasingly alarming is that it went up $1 million. How can the number, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but that is a drastic increase in the numbers.
There's 2 reasons for that. Because the kids on this side were less expensive. And you also, last year, in your budget lines, you decreased the special ed BOCES line by $550,000. So as these numbers switched during the course of the last 5 months, those cost factors went up. You also had kids come out of residential who moved into, they were residential part of school, they moved into the public entity. So some of your costs were reduced on the private side, some of your costs are going to go up on the other. Depends on the needs of the student. Some of the students who moved out of the district this past year were a lesser cost expense to us, as is some of the students who moved in were a high cost. That's the shifting nature of the population that you're dealing with. Unfortunately, it makes it very hard for us to do a projection on exactly what cost, because tomorrow you have 2 or 3 students who are high-cost students who move out of the district, you're going to find yourself not having any difficulty. You'll say, oh, it's no longer. I mean, one of those students, so you should understand, I guess I can change it. One of those students, some of the students cost you over $100,000 a year. And one kid is 150. So when that student leaves, and sometimes they leave, they graduate, just think about that drop in the budget line as to what, it impacts you. So, yeah, it's not a great picture, but the problem is it's based on the population base of where the students are placed and the cost factors for that particular program.
Jody?
So the 3 students that are going to Rockland, have we let Ulster BOCES know, Dr. Corey, that there's a need or a demand
Yes.
for us to have more space for these type of students in Ulster BOCES? I mean, the time they spend on a bus, the transportation for these students, the loss of education that they're getting because they're, on a bus for so long. We need to, reach out, I think, and try to get more placements in.
So I just want to address this because this just came up at the last Ulster County Superintendent's table. We meet once a month. The new assistant superintendent, or deputy superintendent, he was looking at this and he saw that there's a few districts where we have students that go out of the district and they are trying to pull those programs back in. They just took over Anna Devine to see if there's space there. They've asked us for space. They've asked other schools for space. And although this is an interesting thing with space, even though our enrollments decrease, the type of classes that we do house here, we have many more self-contained special ed classes and other service-related providers. So we don't have a lot of space, especially for what they need. So if you bring a special class back, not only do you need that room, but you often need a room for OT, additional space for OT, PT, additional counselors, sometimes behavior management specialists, so it's bigger than just one classroom. But we are talking at the table that we don't want our kids out of the county, we want our kids in the county. And I think that Carlene Spears and Jonas Schenker are working again closely to see how we can pull some of our kids back into the district. So we're all open for it. They're doing the legwork for us to see. The other question related to that is why can't we have, we always get asked, why not, and maybe you can answer this, why can't you bring special classes back here, for whatever? And they'll address this, that sometimes we'll have 2 students.
But could we piggyback with other districts and say, if there's a need for, say, a life skills class, so we could say, we'll have an elementary or middle school here, if the neighboring school wants to do a middle, a high school, so we can share the service almost as a BOCES, so we're all getting the students, involved, but in a closer proximity.
Well, we have looked into that. As a matter of fact, 2 of the students had been going to the Roundout district from here. And unfortunately, this past year, one of those students had a situation where they wouldn't guarantee that the kid could come back to the program. That's one of the reasons why they should can't go into any deeper. So the question really is that sometimes even though you may have the ability to combine with other districts, and that's what we do as we go before we check with other districts as well, she does that. So the question really is that they're going to, if there's 12 slots in that class, and they have a need for 12 students, they're not going to be with someone blunt. They're going to say, well, we're going to take care of our kids. We're not going to send our kid now out of the BOCES when we got a kid here from.
And the difference is BOCES will do it on a first come, first served basis.
Right.
Our district or another district will do it based on their kids. Their students would get priority before our students would, so to speak. But BOCES does look at it and balance it. It's easier for BOCES to open a second section of a class too if they're set up with the infrastructure, so to speak, and the staffing for it.
So Dr. Fogarty, I remember back at the Board of Education Meet the Candidates Night, there was an overwhelming consensus, or if you will, amongst the people who were in attendance there. Have you done a cost analysis of what it would benefit, whether it would benefit our district, or are we good with the way we are? And having, because there was a lot of concern about bringing students back here, as Ms. Little was saying, and having our own courses here, would it be cheaper for us to educate our students here, to provide the services here? Have we done a cost-benefit analysis?
We have looked at that, but if you want to let me show you how to do it, but the students who are out of our district, and later on in this quick presentation, which is taking a little longer than we thought, we'll show you how you have to set up a class. You have basically 12 1-1 classes here. The students who leave us wind up in class sizes of 812, 913, 1214, or 611. So the cost analysis is going to be based on a student per FTE, because what you have to look at is what is your total cost operational here, because you would have to produce that same type of setting, unless the student's needs has changed and they can handle a bigger type of class size with less support services. So as Lisa said, you're going to have to add OT staff, PT, counseling, and every other service. So you make your projections based on what exists today, so you can see the actual cost analysis of that, based on what it is to cost it. Now the other thing is, though, one of the things you should know a little bit is that when you go out into a BOCES special ed, you get high cost aid. After a certain level, we stack the students. So your reimbursement rate, I think, is somewhere in the 60, 70%. After 50,000. And if I'm still correct, unless they changed some of the rules since the last time I did this, is that if you were to have that student here, you would be able to take off some of the cost factors that you can take off with the BOCES operation. But neither that said, we don't look at the cost factors. For say, when we place students by need. So if we're looking for a program that's going to meet a specific need, the question really is that what is the incidence of the population? How many kids can you put into that program? Because if you're gonna operate a program, and there's an 811 and you wind up with 2 kids, your cost factors, but it's still, for me, an 811 class with 2 children is really not an appropriate program. They really need, a full class of operations, social integrations and stuff like that. So we look at it from placement points of view. You were also concerned about trying to get some of those programs back, or get some of those students back. So we have brought students back. And generally we match them to the program levels. So I'm going to let Tricia take over so you can see how we do that.
And we'll let you continue with your presentation.
No more
That's fine.
questions.
No more questions. Let's go with that.
I'm willing to go back and forth. There's 2 sheets that you have that we are not going to show to the public because there's some confidential information on those. And so they're actually the listings of all of the different placements of where the students are. Okay?
You will bring that to the board in executive session at some point?
You already have it.
It's the next meeting.
So just to kind of reiterate some of the things that we were already saying, if you look at, one of the things we looked at is students moving into the district versus moving out of the district. So this is just a comparison over the past 3 years, and you can see that particularly this year, the amount of students, and this is just as of February 1st, whereas, the 2 years before are out for the full school year. So just as of February 1st, our numbers this year of transfer students in special ed is very high by comparison. And our number of BOCES students transferring in needing a very specialized placement is also much higher. As Dr. Fogarty had mentioned, we also had 2 students transition with very high needs transition from one program to another with students who are already here in district, so that increased the costs somewhat. We have 2 students who, because of medical needs, are not only placed in a very specialized program, but then have a registered nurse that is with them on a daily basis for their entire program. So that is also a very high cost. So the students that we're finding are coming in versus the ones who are leaving, we're getting students with a greater amount of need. Just this year alone, I have had 3 students transfer in who are autistic, minimally verbal, have behavior issues where there's a safety concern that they may bolt out of the classroom. So the need for those students and the cost, unfortunately, for those students is a lot greater than some of the students who have been leaving us, who may have been high school age in more of a management needs program where it's just they're in an 811 and they get counseling. These children have a lot of additional services on top of that. So it becomes, again, although the numbers have not changed, of total students, the needs within those numbers have changed pretty dramatically this year. So and again, we included in here just the regulations, New York State Ed regulations regarding special classes, the requirements for creating a special class. So, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into that in a lot of detail, but just showing that the class size, the composition, there's an age range, which I think is on the next page. Yes. So depending on what the reason for grouping the students is, there's a certain number you're limited to putting in. The age range for children under the age of 16 has to be within a 3-year span. So that's where when we talk about looking at programs and creating programs, that's where some of our issues are. We may have a group of students with similar needs, but that age range that is too great. They're 5 years apart. So there's not enough students within that 3-year age range that we can create a program. One of the things we have been doing is I've been talking with Dr. Mears from Ulster BOCES as far as a joint venture, like a satellite program, which is run by BOCES but housed here. We're working on that as well. But there's a similar issue with that in that you have to have students they can't all be Ellenville students if BOCES is running the class. So you have to have students from other districts. And because of where we're located within the county, districts in Ulster County are less likely to send their kids out here. It's a much longer bus ride if there's something available, like at Port Ewan, where they can just send their kids to the BOCES Center. So we also looked at geographically some neighboring districts, but at this point, I haven't gotten anyone who's ready to commit and say, yes, we have kids that we would send to your program. So it's still something we're working on. We don't want to abandon that, but there are some challenges to even creating a BOCES class within the district. All right, and that just a little continuation about the age ranges and grouping students by their needs. And then this is our current in-district program, so I think you all are pretty familiar with that, but just as a frame of reference. The numbers of students, I just wanted to point out that in the middle and high school, it's a little more of a flexible number because I couldn't break it all out. The print would have just been too tiny to read. But a student may have a mixed program, so they may have a special class, self-contained class at the middle or high school just for English, and then they're in a co-taught class for math and social studies, and then they get a resource room for support. So the numbers are a little, that's how many students have at least one period of that class in the middle and high school. But that's a little more of a flexible kind of program. Okay, and just, we also included for you, just for your reference, kind of a makeup. This is, we kind of fudged a makeup of a special class, what it would look like, one of our self-contained classes.
This isn't reflective.
This is not reflective
That's
of
not
it.
reflective, but what this is every class, special class is a profile on that class. And we have to have the students, like GI is, general intellectual ability, so you can't have a kid with 130 IQ in a class with a kid with 60. So when we start to make up classes, we're looking at the total profile of the child in order for us to make sure that class is appropriate, as well as the age levels and the other needs. So when we say we have classes, when we're developing classes, we were develop more classes in district, you have to take all this into account. The state will come and review.
And just so you know too, there's a few spots where the scores are missing on certain students. A lot of times when we get students who transfer from other districts, we don't have a complete record for whatever reason. They weren't tested, or, possibly based on their age, they were too young or whatever. So a lot of times we're filling in those gaps as those students transfer to us from other districts.
And this sample class really is based on GIA intellectual ability. It doesn't factor in any other special services that some of our students
No, it's
receive,
just
correct?
this. Yeah, we would.
This is just a mock profile, just to give you a framework.
My point being, there's no real way to attach an accurate dollar value for this particular class. So
It just gives you an idea of what we do.
Sure.
Okay, so for example, that chart would go out with OT, PT, counseling, all of the stuff that you would need to put on it. We just wanted to show you in a general format that when we start to look at class structure and set up, we're looking at it specifically for kids who are in the same levels of ability and range, so that we can make sure. And some of those classes, as Teresa already said, is that the student may be doing, especially in middle school, very well in, let's say, math, but needs specialized reading services. So that would show up on this profile.
Sure.
If you could turn to page 23, please.
So Dr. Fogarty, in your presentation, if you could just focus on the really on the increases that you see, the large increases, Tricia and Dr. Fogarty.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Just focus on the large increases in your presentation.
The largest increase is for students placed at Orange Ulster. And a lot of that is due in part to the availability of certain programs. Ulster BOCES currently does not have a lot of elementary age programs, so when we have students, like I was speaking of before, students with severe autism, students with a high level of multiple disabilities, so they have, intellectual delays, management needs, and so on. There's not a lot of programs currently offered through Ulster that will meet the needs of those kids. So our next step is to look, our goal is always to make sure we can keep kids, if we have to send them to another program, we can keep them as close to home as possible. So for some of our students, Orange Ulster is the next best. For some of our other students, depending on, again, not just where they live, but also on the availability of the program, we look at Sullivan as well. So Sullivan also, though, is a smaller setting. Sullivan BOCES, they don't have as many programs. So Orange Ulster is really where we've been relying on.
Jody?
So is it that Ulster BOCES is full and we're not getting into them, or the lack of the classroom type that we need?
It's a little of both.
So are we telling Ulster BOCES that these Because Dr. Corey was just here and said he would, make classes if the need was there, so why aren't these classes being made then if there's a
We're
need?
working with, and again, I also, like Lisa was saying about the superintendents, the PPS directors also meet once a month. And Carlene Mears, who is the special ed director at Ulster BOCES, is working on developing additional programs within their setting, but it's not, they're not going to do a great deal of programs every year. So next year, they're introducing 2 new classes. One is they're trying to set up a more school to work program for students who have life skills needs but can work within the community. And they're also looking at an elementary
So
class.
I'll give you an example. I'm not going to use the district, but I know that there's a district in Ulster County that set up a program, one of these self-contained classes in 813 and so forth, and they staffed up, they placed it in another public school, and they did not have all the staffing they needed, BOCES did. So it was really a disaster in the school, and the program ended up getting pulled from that school, and the class didn't work out. The makeup of the class wasn't what it was on paper. So now I think BOCES, the special ed director and the deputy superintendent, are working hard to make sure that when they put the class together, that it's not just a paper, the numbers on paper and it works, and that it integrates well into the public school setting that it's going to be in. So I think they're cautious, and I think and I could be wrong, but I think that they're moving at a bit of a slower pace. The superintendents have told them to kick it up. We don't want our kids out of Ulster County, and they don't want us sending kids out. So they're looking at it now to see if they can expedite, so to speak, and see which of us can hold which programs. So we've expressed all of your concerns and ours, which are the same, to see how we can get the kids back into Ulster County.
Thank you. Continue.
That's, like I said, that's really our largest increase is the BOCES budget, and in particular is the line for the students at Orange Ulster.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I think we all agree, we certainly want to get our special ed students everything that they need, and I know that the needs vary greatly. I just think most of us feel like if you took a look at like a life skills course, and you had enough kids, say, in the high school level or the middle school level, would that be one of the easier programs to bring back?
It's hard to say. Like I said, we've been working with Ulster BOCES and also with, why can't I think of her name, Lori Gallagher from ARC. We had students last year in the pilot program, which was a half-day school to work program here in Ellenville, so we were trying to piggyback on that and perhaps create a program in conjunction where they provided the school to work and either BOCES or we could provide that. There's obstacles, unfortunately. Like I said before, one of them is if it is a BOCES class, we have to have a commitment from other districts as well as ours. Some of it is the age range of the students, although we do have a good number of life skills students, the range is too great. And there's not enough in a particular age range for
Do you have a difference in age range in, say, high school?
Yeah, once a student is 16 or older, then we can go 16 to 21. But then the other piece of that is too, is even if we were able, which I hope we are at some point, we're continuing to work on trying to get a program together, but we have kids who are placed in other programs and have been successful. So the following, even after we've done all our legwork, is the commitment of parents who would be willing to move their students from, say, an Orange Ulster BOCES or another program.
Is the difference that Orange offers so many more programs because of the size and the amount of schools that they have?
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? If not, thank you, Dr. Fogarty, and thank you, Mrs. Edwards.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. We will now go to, I promise, Mr. Pabon, you are up now.
Page 8.
Good evening. I want to thank Mr. Napoli for covering line items 156 and 157 when he first introduced the budget.
But I will begin with line 30, our social studies. So tonight, where we have change, will pretty much goes from 6 departments. So we'll begin with social studies, and there you'll see an increase of $3,000. And that's addressing, we have a new AP course coming into place, as well as our college super class where we continue to upgrade text and literature. So we have new changes, so the approximate money that we put in is $3,000. Moving along to line 49 is our art department. The increase there is a minimal $350. Nonetheless, it is an increase. Line item 61, we have the business technology department. You'll see $1,000. We're looking to create a new course, the cybersecurity course that we're eager to have developed, and we're seeking to potentially collaborate with higher institutions to offer this course. Line 69, we have our ENL, or also known as ESL. There's an increase of $125. And if you move forward to line 137, you'll see our college student support transportation. We're looking to continue to expose our students to campus visits, including tech schools as well. So as we know, transportation is costly, so we added an additional $1,000 there. Our TSDT program in line 153 also has an increase of $1,800. As you have heard from our students in the past, these are our current students, future teachers. We're also sending them to conferences, college visits as well, so we added an additional $1,800 on that line. And those are the increases in the 6 departments, 6 line items that we've noted.
Could you talk about your wish list about adding a foreign language teacher?
So,
the need for it in high school, etc.
Absolutely. So we do need a foreign language teacher. As you know, we need to prepare them in the middle school to come ready to begin at the Spanish 1 level. Currently, we're behind approximately 2 years with our students being able to fulfill their requirements, the language requirements.
And that's in Spanish?
And that's in Spanish. We currently only offer Spanish. We have 5 levels of Spanish, 2 of them granting college credit, which is Spanish 4 and Spanish 5.
When you say you're 2 years behind, can you elaborate?
So our students should be prepared to enter Spanish 1 at the high school level. There hasn't been, a teacher to provide that need, so we have to, catch up in the high school, and that may take longer than expected. Usually they come prepared from the middle school to enter Spanish 1 and receive credit.
I'm going to ask
the rest of the board for your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Pabon, can you reiterate? I didn't follow you. So the students come out of middle school prepared for Spanish 1, but at the high school level, you don't have the resource to meet that need, or does the middle school not have it?
So in the middle school, we currently need a Spanish teacher.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else on this position wish to be heard?
I do have some follow-up questions, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Pabon, first of all, for coming.
You're welcome.
Good to see you. Going back to the textbook request, line 30.
Excuse me, Mr. Can we just ask the rest of the board about this Spanish position?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had. I apologize.
Anybody else want to be heard on the Spanish position?
Yes.
Iris?
I'm just to follow up on Willie's confusion. You listed this as so that there would be a Spanish teacher in the middle school. It's not as specific to the high school that you need an additional teacher. You want a Spanish teacher in the middle school. Is that what this request is?
So we currently have the Spanish teacher now in the high school.
Right.
Catching up the students who did not receive Spanish the previous year.
So if they have Spanish in the middle school, is that Spanish 1, and they come to high school prepared to start Spanish 2?
So they can obtain a credit in Spanish at the middle school level.
If they have it at 7th and 8th grade.
7th and 8th is a 2-year curriculum.
In the middle school, 7th and 8th grade, and then get the credit at the end, possibly get the credit at the end of 8th grade. So going back to 2008, when we had staff cuts, we it's not mandated, but what we did is we cut Spanish teacher. We added the Spanish teacher back, but we can't catch up. We can't get those kids in 7th and 8th grade. So there's a need in the high school, so that's where we put the position.
So what I'm saying to the board is now's the time if we're going to add things, and we need to take a look at this, and what are your thoughts? Mr. Burns?
So I'm going to jump on the confusion bandwagon here. So how many Spanish teachers do we have in the middle school?
Presently, to my understanding, there's one teacher.
Teaching 7th and 8th?
8th, just 8th grade.
We don't offer it in 7th anymore.
That's correct.
He wants to keep, so what Mr. Pabon wants to do is he got a teacher this past year, an additional staff, and we added it back so that we could have 7th and 8th grade, but we could not place the teacher in the middle school because there was such need of the students that didn't get the 2 years in the middle school. So we're on a catch-up, and we can't catch up, and that's the problem.
So I guess what I'm asking is where is the hole? Why can't the person in the middle school teach 7 and 8?
Because there's been such a need to catch students up. It would push up. What we could do is we talked about taking our college classes and breaking them down into half-year classes as opposed to full-year classes, but it'll have an impact on the program. So we need a teacher, we need a 7th grade, we need 5 sections of 7th grade Spanish right now. That's what we need.
And how many high school Spanish teachers?
We currently have 3, and it's been working out based on that need.
So they're teaching 1 through 5 between those 3 teachers?
That's correct.
We need a teacher, we need to get a teacher.
So here's the thing.
Never going to catch up.
We have like a wish list here, and I just have to tell you, we have to come back to this in March. I'm hoping for more state aid. Our wish list is about $500,000. Right now, we're at the tax cap, eating into fund balance. So, you know, depending upon what we get, we can definitely prioritize and see where we want to go. Your wish list is on page 3. We have everything listed, and we'll total it up and see where we are.
But I think, and as we talked about this is the time now to be talking about this.
Absolutely.
To be looking to put this in the budget if we're going to need it.
We can always.
I think that and I agree with Mr. Burns and Ms. Little, if there's a need to add a Spanish teacher and we're behind to prepare our kids for the future, then we need to be taking a serious look at putting this in the budget.
No one's disagreeing with that. We can always ask to override the tax caps if we don't get the revenues that come in to add the programs we need to. I mean, that's an option. The tax caps really cut our ability to add programs or cut other programs out, for them. So we're not.
Let's put this at the top of our list when we
Okay.
revisit this for revenue. Jody?
One question is, if our kids are lagging behind, are we going to see the demand for a college course have to be a full enrollment if these kids aren't getting that far, if we held them back?
We hope we don't have to get to that point, but that's something that the numbers would dictate.
My fear is if we get to that point and we have another Spanish teacher, we are kind of catching up from the lag and then not having kids take college courses, are we going to then have a teacher with possibly not to support the students' needs?
Well, the Spanish 1 course is foundational, it's needed.
Correct.
It's interesting, it's a great question you asked, because we were talking about something called a biliteracy seal, which is an additional stamp. We were having this conversation today where our students, in addition to graduating, they fulfill a requirement, and this is through the New York State Ed bilingual department, where they can end up with a biliteracy seal. So when you start offering a program like that within the Spanish program, and it's not necessarily just Spanish, it applies to all languages, that tends to also promote the language programs and pique the interest of students to continue their studies in a particular language. So even though we're peaked at Spanish 5, there's a possibility that there could be a Spanish 6. A lot of it's contingent on the interest and the value that's added to the student's experience.
And do you think it's beneficial if we do go to a half-year program to get our students ready for college? When they leave here, they're taking a lot of college courses they're taking throughout the year. Then when they get to college,
It's one semester.
it's one semester, and they're, in a very rigorous course, and they're not ready for that. So maybe we should look into changing our model a little bit for the college courses and doing them by semester, and getting our students prepared a little bit better.
And that's a conversation, we currently in our science, we offer our biology college, which is semester-based, and that's a transition that we do have to explore because when we talk about rigor, it just doesn't apply to the actual content. It also means the fluency and how quick we're able to produce, and part of that is the semester-based experience. So that's something that we have to look at beyond the science experience.
Absolutely.
John?
Yeah, you're ahead in tonight's batting lineup, ahead of Mr. Spinelli, but I see that we also have an additional, so would this teacher go in the middle school to catch us up or in the high school?
Sure.
Middle school, so currently, as presented before, we're talking about 7th and 8th grade, and that's where we have that need.
Okay, thank you.
Or if not, we will always be behind the 8 ball.
Right.
Thank you. Willie?
Are we finished with this?
Yes, we're done.
I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to contribute, answer any questions. And just to kind of follow up on last comments, it's throwing me off just a little bit to talk about, to have the high school principal discuss positions for the 8th grade. That was just a little confusing for me. But to go back to the budget line items here, the AP course that we're going to be getting textbooks for, and I'm all for them, but have we approved that course?
So yes, that went through the curriculum committee already. We traditionally in the past have offered AP Euro. We transitioned now to AP World History, which is more inclusive of the times. So that course was approved. This year, in following the theme of rigor, we started offering a pre-AP course, getting the students exposed to the expectations and demands. So our AP teacher that's slotted to teach this course will also be attending, some follow-up conferences, developing the syllabi that's, for this course as well. In addition to that, you also notice that we've now been offering College Soup, I believe, for 3 years now. That course, 2 semesters, has 9 textbooks. So we also know that with a diversity of authors, which is great, different worldviews. What's interesting, and what we know, the maintenance of curriculum and with the college text, they sometimes change as well. So forecasting that, we put that in for our budget.
Okay, great. And I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Regarding BOCES, Mr. Pavone.
Yes.
Has the demand for BOCES classes and courses, have they increased or have they decreased along with our actual numbers of attended courses?
So what's interesting is when we talk about BOCES, we have to look at from 2 perspectives. So this past year, we've also sent students to Sullivan BOCES for some programs that don't exist at Ulster. So I think that interest level as it pertains to a different site and different course offerings has increased our numbers a bit. But overall, in the 5 years, there's been a consistent trend, but there have been increases, but they fluctuate. So, and I think last time I was here last year, we had this conversation as it related to who starts a program and who doesn't finish as well. So, but for the most part, those numbers are consistent. I believe that this year we are at about 73 enrollment at the Port Ewing site.
Great, great. I just speaking for myself, I would like to see the BOCES numbers increase. And I don't know exactly what needs to happen budget-wise in order to promote that increase. But I'd like to see it in the budget somewhere.
So we have on the BOCES budget under career tech, that one line I pointed to, I think was line 6. There are additional, the way that pricing works is that we pay, let's say we pay for 80 seats, and then you get an additional 12 seats. So we're not at capacity. So there's not a need to budget for more seats. It's a matter of promoting and finding more students that are interested in going to the program. So I know that we have talked about different initiatives to do that. Mr. Pabon and I spoke today. I know you had 2 questions at the last board meeting. That promotional video, they're working on voiceovers, so you don't have that heavy rock, that heavy rock music. So it'll promote the programs on the educational TV channel. That's it's moving along, and hopefully we'll have that in the next week. Or if BOCES can't do it, our studio's doing it. And we talked about it, the BOCES night for parents, and Mr. Pabon did reach out, and they don't do a BOCES night, but they will set up here at our parent-teacher conferences. So,
And they're also coming into the actual classrooms tomorrow. They present to students as well, social studies classes.
Do you think that the vocational programs offered at BOCES would be a benefit to the student population here and ultimately the community at large?
To offer programs here?
Here to increase our enrollment and send them up to Port Huron, just to increase our attendance or our enrollment in the vocational aspect of BOCES in general, whether the class is here or Port Huron. Do you think it'd be a service to our population?
Absolutely.
talk about the increase we have seen.
Yeah, we have seen that increase. We've talked about this in different programs, whether it's a men's group conversation and that word mentorship. Mm-hmm. You have to expose folks early, our students early into the program. So when we talk about site visits, that's a conversation to be having, at 6th grade, to planting those seeds early on, and potentially developing a collaboration with BOCES to provide transportation site visits with families while the children are young. Mm-hmm. I think in the world that we live in now, you need meaningful skill sets beyond passing Regents exams, and critical thinking is important, but also applying that thinking to a particular site is imperative if you're going to make it in the 21st century. So those conversations are important. We reached out to BOCES today to see if we can have, in the past we've had representatives be here during parent-teachers conferences, but we need more participation of the parents to come out for our conferences so they can also have these conversations on the side while they transition from one, they follow their kid's schedule. So it's important, it's necessary, we need it, it goes beyond the diploma.
So we haven't reached capacity, thank you, Mr. McCollum, we haven't reached capacity as far as seats are concerned.
That's correct.
And now the missing component then is generating interest.
That's right.
Okay.
We don't have to.
Mr. Pabon, I'd like to say thank you for all your hard work, and certainly I want to, on behalf of the board, thank you for your dedication and commitment to the students and staff of this district. You do a wonderful job, you do a hard job well, and we look forward to our continuing relationship with you. I also want to mention that, small increase, you were very fiscally conscious as you always are. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to thank the board sincerely for supporting our students. Every time we come here, it's always, public speaking is always a nervous experience, and but when it comes to giving to our students, you guys always give a thumbs up, so we just want to say thank you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Pabon. And if you want to exit, we certainly understand. I was going to say Dr. Fogarty and Ms. Edwards, if you wanted to follow their lead.
You didn't have to say anything.
I think they were running without their jacket. I just wanted him to get his coat. All right, we'll now go to Mr. Spinelli. Welcome.
Thank you.
As with Mr. Pabon, we'd like to have you point out your significant increases.
Of course. Good evening, board.
Good evening.
Okay, first of all, please, if you look at line 14, that was originally put in there to purchase calculators. Those have been purchased, so now we're starting to scale back from that. We're backing out of that budget line. Going to the next page, if you look at line 49 underneath art, it's a small increase, but an increase nonetheless of $400 into the art program, which we're just building upon an already great program. If you skip down now to line 71, foreign language, consumable workbooks, who knows, this may have just changed. but talked with the teacher and looked at the past cost and reduced the amount because they don't really use the workbooks all that much. Okay, page 3. Line number 98. That is a small $250 increase underneath equipment repair and rental for a shared cost that I had with Mr. Moyer regarding a piece of PE equipment that was in need of replacement. Then please go to page 4. Line number 146. Underneath STEAM, $500 addition has been made for equipment repair and rental. They have several pieces of expensive machinery in there that may need repair over time. And then, as you will remember from Mr. Napoli, he touched upon building-wide field trips, contractual, and general supplies.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Could you talk about your wish list a little bit?
Sure. Which item specifically?
There's quite a few. It's like Christmas.
Is there anyone in particular you'd like me to start with?
Well, like Christmas, I'd like you to scale down.
Well, with addition of 3 additional part-time monitors, that would be for the cafeteria to decrease the number of students that are in the cafeteria at a given time, to hopefully be able to stagger lunch and recess, so that because right now, I'll give you a for example, we have about 145, 146 sixth graders, all right, which speaks to another item on there that we're going to need another section of everything in 7th grade, because moving up, currently we have 6 6th grade teachers. Going up to 7th grade, we only have 5. But going back to lunch, with that number of students in the cafeteria, it is quite packed. So if I was able to cut that in half and have half at recess and half getting lunch, and then midway through that period flip-flop, that reduces the amount of students in the cafeteria that can get their lunch faster. It makes it safer in the cafeteria for the students. And then outside, it also makes it safer for the students, or for indoor recess purposes. It makes it more manageable and safer for the students as well. The behavior management specialist / crisis counselor, I could even tell you there that that would be wonderful to have even another guidance counselor. Just, we have, on an ongoing basis, day to day, students that come in with different crises. They need support. And right now we're working with a single guidance counselor and a school psychologist, and then an AP and a principal. So I asked some of my colleagues at other middle schools, and they at least have a half a person more than we do at this time, given our population of students.
So on this list, if you were to prioritize, what would be your number one wish?
If I had, we'd probably go cafeteria monitors counseling.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Byrne?
You're telling us that you need additional section of each subject for 7th grade, so wouldn't that take priority?
Of course, sir, but I think that Mr. Verbone and I can fill some of that internally. Okay? So we're already exploring those avenues in order to figure out ways to do it in a more cost-effective way.
Mr. Spinelli, could you touch upon the workbook situation down in the middle school? You have ample textbooks down there?
Actually, just today we had...
and where are we with that?
Okay, just today we had a rep from HM come in and do a presentation for our 6th grade about a social studies series, which they will be piloting for about 90 days to give a good shot to. Has an online component, has a textbook, also has an optional consumable workbook that can be purchased as well.
So we've heard a lot at the last couple of meetings from several of the staff and concerns about the textbooks. So I just want to make sure that right now we're good.
We're
You're saying
working,
that you're working on it?
Yep.
And the matter is being resolved, and there's going to be no shortage of textbooks or workbooks or resources needed down in that school.
I would not foresee that happening.
Any questions?
Mr. Spinelli, the additional special education teacher, would that be a self-contained or?
That was actually, that came out of Miss Edwards' projections for possible need at the middle school going into next year.
Jody?
Are any of these, for example, the special ed, could we share or use one from the elementary school if the numbers are decreasing in the elementary school, if the kids are transitioning into the middle school for the special ed, and then also for the 7th grade, if we have 5 sections for 6th grade that are now going, or 6 sections for 6th grade, they're going to be moving to 7th grade, what does our 5th grade enrollment look like coming in?
5th grade enrollment coming in is, I think, around 120, somewhere around there.
So it's still a higher number?
Yeah, it's still, in August, I got the number written on a board for some reason, but in August, early August, it was at 104, but we're far exceeded that at this time. But yeah, we're absolutely looking at ways to, reduce and keep the budget reasonable.
So on a brighter note, I'm hearing that the Chromebooks are in, so your staff will be getting some shortly.
I actually just ran into Moses when I went to go grab something out of my office. He was taking care of the 6th grade.
That's great, and they're coming out faster than we anticipated.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So just so I'm clear, so at the next meeting, if staff comes back again, I just want to be able to say that 100%, 110%, Mr. Spinelli has advised us that that situation is rectified.
Yeah, we're working on that. I even had Mrs. Jackson order a science kit through FOSS, which we're looking at, and then we're going to look at a supplemental textbook that will address the specific topics that they teach.
Thank you, Mr. Spinelli. Any other questions, Mr.
I'd
Spinelli?
just like to make a statement. Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to compliment you, Mr. Spinelli, on your use of the color palette and those color combinations.
Thank you.
I'd also like to compliment you on what is evident to me, which is the amount of care that you took looking at the different learning materials down in your school and looking to reduce your budget in anticipation, I'm sure, of knowing that we may be increasing our costs by purchasing textbooks or any other learning materials. It shows me anyway that you did look at it holistically and you're paying attention, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Jody?
One other question I have is the accelerated biology class that we want to share with the high school. I really would like to see if we can get that into the middle school, because that'll give our students an opportunity once they get to the high school to take more advanced classes that we are lacking. So I think we can really try to work that in.
So fortunately, Mr. Babone is still here. He loves staying here, so we're going to ask, how does that look? How's the prospect of that look, Mr. Babone, as Mrs. Little's concerned?
I can comment one
Sure.
small piece on that,
Yeah.
and then Mr. Pavone can take over. In order to move in that direction, and Mr. Pavone, jump in if you need to, we need to make sure that next year's 7th grade is learning the material that they will need in order to transition into that accelerated 8th grade class. So we're 1 year
So we
away.
need to be targeting the 6th grade students to make sure we can place them in a 7th grade class, that they'll get the information
Correct.
needed to be able to place them in 8th grade accelerated.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's in the works.
Thanks,
Yes, it is.
Mr. Babone and
Okay.
Mr. Spinelli. Mr. Spinelli, thank you very much. I want to tell you that I also want to thank you for your, I know you're new to the district, but we really appreciate the job you're doing. A lot of good things are happening down there, and you really did take some care and concern with your budget, and we appreciate you keeping the pencil sharpened and recognizing our needs in this district. We will certainly visit your wish list. I'm glad I don't have you for Christmas. Definitely don't want you for Christmas.
No harm is right.
Thank you. We'll now go to Dr. Fox. Welcome, Dr. Fox.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for having me. I think I'll be probably the briefest of the 3 buildings. The proposed budget that you have before you is very much a rollover budget without many increases. If you'll go to line 31, That would be the Super Kids program that we've implemented this year as a pilot in K. We plan to move that into first grade next year, both grades in fact. It is going so well that we would like to go pre-K through 2 next year, working with Miss Urbina to identify some funds this school year so that we could get those kids in, so that we could do some curriculum development over the summer with the teachers so that they're prepared. In fact, tomorrow we have a full day of in-service on Super Kids, and it'll be highlighted in our next newsletter.
Jody?
So if we're looking to go pre-K to second, should we have the $1,500 for workbooks then for second grade?
I will work with Mr. Napoli.
We're going to try to find some funds for this year so we can be ready for PD first thing in the summer. So that's the reason why it's not in the budget for next year. We're hoping to use funds from this year to cover that.
Okay,
So
so
we
then
can-
we'll see in 2019-20 the increase in the for
Consumables.
workbooks.
Right, it would be
For second grade.
consumables, correct.
Okay.
Consumable increase.
Then to line 95, a very moderate increase for the Young Elementary Music Symposium for the dues. Line 154 was the field trips that I believe Mr. Napoli covered earlier. We had budgeted about 1,000 a grade level for field trips. We're making that more appropriate at 1,500. What we anticipate is having a pool of money available for field trips, because obviously a trip to Paws and Claws will not cost the same as maybe going to a museum in New York City. And the bulk of that is transportation related. We try to work with our vendors so that we get discounted tickets for entrance to these things. Lines 156 and 57 are adjustments to supplies to be more appropriate to the actual spending. And boy, I have a short Christmas list. Now, seriously, the only thing that we had on our wish list at the elementary level would be another assistant principal, but we understand the current fiscal and political climate, and that may not be possible at this time unless the legislature comes up with some more money in state aid for the district, but
Let's hear your reasoning for the additional principal.
we have approximately 750 children, pre-K to 5, and approximately 100 staff members to supervise. If we want to see the gains that we'd like to see in our academics, I think that we need more support administratively to help carry out some of those initiatives. That would be my recommendation.
Dr. Fox, can you repeat yourself?
Yes, sir.
That last sentence, please. If we'd like to see,
If we'd like to see the academic gains that we would like in our district and the improvement, we need to have the administrative support to support teaching and learning in the classrooms.
Is it feasible, just brainstorming here, spitballing if you will, to bring the assistant principal down from the middle school halftime to you, since it seems to be an increase in students?
I think if we started looking, I don't know if we're being facetious or not, but we'd have to really look at things like that seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just spitballing out there to try
Yeah.
to look at ways of conserving some finances there. Anybody want to be heard?
Dr. Fox, do you think that the additional, in other words, to make the gains in the academics that you're looking for, could it be an additional assistant principal, or could it be the fact that we haven't had steady leadership in the elementary now?
I'm not sure. At this point, I would consider myself very seasoned and veteran, and I'm getting a workout myself.
No reflection on you and 100 teachers, if that was the correct number.
Yeah, with staff,
is
including
a lot.
support staff, it is. But truthfully, we have a new team down there, a new assistant principal, new clerical staff. So we're doing bang-up job, I think, for all being new. But that also gives us the opportunity to reinvent things and look at things freshly.
Iris?
Currently, Mr. Knight, what is he taking care of down in the elementary school? I mean, he comes in, I don't know if he comes on a regular basis or as needed, but what is he doing there?
For the most part, he's doing our APPRs, our teacher evaluations, which is a tremendous help. Tremendous help.
But that's where an assistant principal would take over those
Absolutely.
responsibilities, correct? Currently,
Yes.
we aren't able to get them done without him here. That's what it appears.
It'd be a challenge for sure.
Jody?
This may be a question for Vince. Seeing we're putting more money into the budget for field trips, is that going to decrease or eliminate fundraising in the classrooms?
Correct. Hopefully I said it earlier, but the goal is to have no fundraising for field trips, K through 12, district-wide. It's all going to be funded by the budget.
One field trip per grade level.
That wouldn't include senior trips and.
That it does not.
Not the 8th grade trip and not the 12th grade trip.
Okay.
The class trips and the class fundraising is outside the scope of that.
So really then the only classes that will be fundraising will be possibly 8th grade or the, I think it's 6th, 7th, 8th is those.
And clubs.
And clubs. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Bruce?
I'm all set, Mr. President.
No further questions. And Dr. Fox, I'd also like to thank you. We know that you came in, half a year almost, and, did a bang-up job down there, continue to do great things down there. Hear so much good things about you, and I really appreciate the work you're doing down there. Please keep it up, and also your staff, please mention it to them. Thank you for being fiscally, keeping your pencil sharp.
Thank you. I'm enjoying myself, and we have a wonderful, wonderful staff down there. That speaks to all of you, and thank you for what you do as well.
Dr. Fox, was today the 100th day?
Yes, sir. I'm not 100 years old.
I can see that.
Though many of our staff did dress as 100-year-olds, and if you get to the elementary school, I'll put it in this week's newsletter, but the pictures of the little ones projecting what they would look like at 100 was just
some of these staff members.
comical.
Some of the staff members sent photos around. They dressed up as 100 years old.
Yes.
I was frightened awake this morning. My significant other, she went into kindergarten. I was like, what happened? Did I sleep through Christmas? Thank you.
Rick Van Winkle, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Great family photo. Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Moyer.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Good evening, Mr. Moyer.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. I'd like to start off with my thank you from the department and the staff and the student athletes. Some of your supports that you've given us over the last year and a half have been tremendous. They're still talking about the increase in schedules, and that's been very positive for our student athlete development, and also, the recognition of the fall athletes, and I still hear positive comments about that. And so those are some thank yous I want to share out
We
before
intend to recognize the spring ones as well.
and the winter ones
And
as
the
well.
winter ones, yes.
Okay. So to go right to the budget lines, if you look at lines 5 and 6 now, what I'd like to do moving forward, similar to basketball, is I'd like to pay for scorekeepers and timekeepers at our varsity and JV volleyball matches. We currently do not do that, and I think that would be a positive initiative that would be in line with what we do for basketball. If you look at line number 8, moving forward into next year, what I'd like to do is replace our current pitching machine for softball. It's very antiquated at this point. It's probably well over 15 years old. And then also have some additional funding to purchase additional equipment if the need arises. Doing a little research, pitching machines cost anywhere between $2,300 and $2,800. So that's why that's there. Entry fees for winter, just some slight increases, if possible, for track and field if they go to additional invitationals. They did go to 1 or 2 this past winter. Boys basketball went to a tournament, for example. If the girls want to go into a tournament, there may be a need to pay for some additional fees for those. Lines 12, 13, and 14, I just want to thank Mr. Napoli again. He was very helpful as I shared with him some specific information about where those lines are, and really those are some basic changes or adjustments to indicate where the money goes to. The ROI, specifically regional office there, that's a big chunk of the money there. It's about $16,000. If you're looking, let me make sure I got my numbers accurate. Yeah, 16,200. My contact at the BOCES there said to plan for about a 2.5% to a 3% increase. So again, Mr. Napoli, thanks for helping me adjust those. Excuse me, equipment repair for the fall. Just a slight increase to reflect a potential cost increase for equipment repair and conditioning, specifically with all of our football equipment. Lines 18, 19, and 20, sports travel. Mr. Napoli can give you some more detail there, but much of that is related to the contractual increases, I believe, and also helps to cover for additional postseason trips. Teams are doing well this year. Specifically, I can talk to basketball this winter. Basketball, boys and girls are going to both make sectionals or maybe a need to travel. So that's the line 21 is a significant increase, and I think my conversations with Superintendent Wiles, you as a board are willing to retake over, I guess, the budget line to reflect paying for the varsity athletic banquet and all the costs associated with that. Is that's accurate?
Let me just ask to poll the board right here. You guys were all good with that? Is there any issues? Jody?
I thought we were paying for the athletes themselves. We're not covering 100% of the cost, correct?
Correct.
That was for this year, right?
Well, that's forever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the board is only paying for the athletes, it's not paying for the coaches or anyone else, it's only for the students.
Does your number, Mr. I'm sorry. Does your number, Mr. Moyer, pardon me, I'm very tired. Does your number reflect that arrangement?
I think I can relook at that, and that may reduce that a little bit. Just to, I can't give you the specifics right now, but I apologize if I misunderstood. So we can make that adjustment. So
thank you, Mr. Moyer.
So you said it doesn't include the parents, right? That's it includes the coaches.
Well, that's what the board had discussed, and then there may have been some confusion, and Mr. Moyer may have added all the expenses in, so he's going to go back and just run the numbers again. That might come down the next time I give you this document.
I just want to be clear, we just want to cover the students, and that's it, correct? Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Moyer.
Yeah, so, and then also additionally, the certificates, the letters and pins and all of that, I think are part of that process. And lines 30, 31, 32, as I reviewed our uniform rotation schedule, slight increases to cost, replace costs for football jerseys and pants, both at the varsity and modified level. And on the rotation schedule moving into next year, the last time track and field uniforms were ordered were 2012. So I'm looking to potentially replace those for the track and field program. And as you know, they would be used both for the indoor season as well as the outdoor season, as well as our cross-country athletes for that. And then the only other thing that I put on my wish list, recognizing the the constraints and being fiscally responsible, is the field repair and maintenance wish list item. Our baseball field out back and our softball field has not been tended to in many, many years, and potentially looking to do some good things with that if possible. So reseeding, doing everything we need to do to bring that back up to being a much, what I guess I would characterize as a safer playing surface for our athletes.
So is there any way?
So that's a wish list
Safety
item.
issue, is that something that we could do under a construction project? Or?
So yes, so that's one of the things, we met with the new architects to go over the building condition survey last week, and that's one of the items we asked them to look at. This is not in the budget for this year. We've talked about it before, but it's a pretty hefty expense. Mr. Moyer brought in a company that actually does these types of upgrades. That's how we came up with the number. It might be more or less if we go through a capital project, but just to have a company come in and do it, we have to bid it out.
So is there something we can do this year? Obviously, you're saying I have concerns if it's a safety issue, I want to see the fields in good condition. Is there something we can do this year that would get us some aid on it?
We would not get aid on it unless it was part of a capital project. If we did it this year, we would end up using any fund balance that we had.
Any left over in the maintenance budget,
Right.
which we can do.
Okay.
John?
Yeah, I think it's long known that our field, particularly our baseball field, has been neglected, and it's not too many years ago where we had a student helicoptered out when a ball took an unfriendly bounce off of an infield that was not in the best of shape. So I certainly would be favorable to Mr. Moyer's wish list on that. The one question I had here, Mr. Moyer, which jumps out, seems to be at everybody, section dues went down, state dues went down, but the regional office of athletics jumped from 4,000 to over 16. Could you give us a little bit more information on what prompted that?
So that's a great question, and I anticipated that question. So the bulk of what we pay for is in the regional office of athletics. And in the previous budgets, and Mr. Napoli, you can chime in if you want to, I think the Section 9 dues and the state dues lines were over budgeted. So it really just balances out the total amount that we pay every year for those various dues. The state dues are for the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. Those have been standard, and they've remained the same for many years, and I anticipate they'll continue due to budget constraints. So that's that's based on the number of students that we have, that 1275 number, and that's what we paid this school year, and that's what we paid the year before. The Section 9 dues, I reduced that a little bit because it reflects of what we actually pay.
So Mr. Burns, I know Mr. Moyer said before he thanked me for helping, but really it's the opposite. I had a hard time grasping what happens with the BOCES and the OCIA and Section 9, the expenses for all budgets in the past. So I sat down with Mr. Moyer and he doped it out for me, and he actually showed me where the true expenses are. So this is just a shift in where the expenses are truly coded to in the budget. We've been spending the same amount of money over the years. It's just a matter of where I've been coding it in the budget.
Okay, so it's kind of like the BOCES doing the scheduling and things like that, and, okay.
Right, gentlemen, this is not the town board meeting. They've stopped coming here and now they're back over at town hall. Yeah.
If you want to sit through our budget meeting, just please feel free.
Can I ask some comments? Thank you. So sorry, town hall?
Correct.
So yes, Mr. Burns, it's all this, other than the officials' costs, and you can see that there's different lines for that, and contractually they went up as well. But it's all the other expenses associated with the athletics in terms of assigning officials as being one of the biggest cost factors there as well, and the other ancillary items that they support each school district with.
So while you're here, Mr. Moyer, I'm going to address, the board will take out their option A, page 22. And it will be the transportation quotes that we have here, option A, option B, option C. So that we can talk about, because this definitely revolves around athletics. And we can talk about what the board's wishes are, as you can see what the numbers are, and get some feedback from the board here while we're looking at this budget. Jody?
My first question is, are any of and all of our staff, coaches on board if we were to change the time?
We have not had those discussions at length yet at a labor management meeting.
Anybody else want to be heard on this transportation? Iris?
Well, I guess that's important information to make sure that everybody's willing to do it. As a board member, though, looking at these options, I'm inclined to go for option A and option C, just from a fiscal point of view. If we increased the bus to go a half an hour later than it's currently going. So, that's what I would support.
Is there any other input from the board on which option looks best to them while we're doing these numbers? Jody?
I'm with Iris, option A and C, but I think first we need to have a talk with staff
Absolutely.
because, without knowing the input of our staff, we really can't make a decision.
We are, after the board meeting a few meetings back, we are doing C on a basis.
As needed.
As needed. When the coaches request it, the coaches that don't go to faculty meetings, when they request those runs, we've been adding them
And the
back.
coaches know that this is available to them if needed.
Currently, yeah,
Yes.
do they, yes, they do.
Okay.
The non-teacher coaches do
They
know
do know
that.
that, okay.
They do know that, yes, they do. And I'll review that with our spring coaches as we start our season as well.
So I think it would help the administration if we were in consensus on which option we would be looking at. I got 2 for option A. Anybody else? Just go around, and Jody went with Mr. Burns.
Well, I have a question. I don't know if this is relevant, but it seems to fit into what we talked about when we discussed this bus procedure earlier in the year. Have we had talks with the union leadership about the faculty meetings? I believe it was one of the modified coaches came and talked to us about the percentage of practices that we lose when we can't practice every Tuesday afternoon or whenever we have faculty meetings added up. So I was wondering, have we had those conversations?
We haven't had a specific conversation about faculty meetings other than all the teachers are required to go to them. I'm sure it will come up during the next labor management meeting when we talk about option A and, what the additional potential costs could be.
Along those lines, I had proposed a later bus schedule early in the year because we'd heard some concerns that some of our athletes couldn't get rides home. And so, I'm sorry, but I support the coaches, but to me, it's more important what the kids' needs are. And, so I would go with A.
Thank you. Reverend Collins? Mr. Bruce?
I'm not prepared to vote.
Okay. That's not a vote, just an idea where you stand.
I'm not sure.
Okay. I would go with option A. And Randy?
I spoke about a student survey to see what the students are feeling about this.
We have borrowed that.
I spoke about that, but I wasn't here last meeting, so maybe it was brought up.
No.
A student survey on busing,
Excuse me?
to get the student input on who would ride the bus. We'll work on that.
So it would seem, just so we're aware, option B would seem to be at least, from, if I understand the percent of tax, would be at least a percent of tax, correct?
Well, it's almost a
No, B.
Oh, B is almost a point of tax.
Almost a point of tax.
A is about a quarter.
So you have some general consensus of where the board is leaning to option A. Any other questions for Mr. Moore?
Have we somewhere along the line discussed 1, 2, and 3?
On Mr. Moore's budget.
I'm sorry.
Yes, the stipends, Mr. Moore, could you discuss line items 1, 2, and 3?
Those are contractual items. I'll actually, if you don't mind, I'll pass that off to Mr. Napoli, because that was something that he specifically put into this budget for us. So I think those are the coaching salaries, Mr. Napoli?
Correct.
Spring stipends are down.
Correct. That was a line item that was budgeted higher than it needed to be. So it's one of those lines that we looked at, and I adjusted that down. The other ones are pretty much on target.
So these are all just straight contractual, there's no problem, it's just contractual items?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
We were off by $12,000 in the spring,
In the past, correct.
and it still includes filling up all the positions that we've had. Like I know right now.
Correct. I don't have any, in the past, I don't think we've had any positions that have gone unfilled.
We should look at that, because I thought it was pretty, we'll take another look at that and bring it back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board for Mr. Moore? If not, thank you for all you've done for the district this year. I've certainly seen some great morale improvement in sports and our teams. It was wonderful to see where the football team went to and some other teams that have excelled and the coaches that have excelled. So we really appreciate your leadership, and certainly, I know it's not easy preparing a budget. You want to give the best to the children at the same time balancing that with the needs of the taxpayer. So again, good job, and we certainly look forward to working with you in the future.
Great, I appreciate it, and I'll keep you posted on the upcoming sectional tournament, because both our boys and girls are going to play.
Tomorrow night.
5.
Thank you.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to remind everyone, tomorrow night, the boys who are the Division III Mid-Hall champions are playing in the semifinals tomorrow at 5. They play Millbrook from Division IV. And if we win, then we play the winner of the Division I, Division II game, and that would also be Thursday, the day after, and that would also be at 5 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr.
Ulster
Moore.
County Community College.
At Ulster County Community.
Wish them well, and hopefully some of us or all of us can try to make those.
We can't make Thursday.
Not Thursday.
Not Thursday, we have board docs, but we can make Wednesday.
Hopefully, we look forward to seeing many of you there tomorrow.
Yes, move the board docs.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate the support on behalf of our staff and our students.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. And just a couple of housekeeping things before I turn it over to Vince. One thing I would be remiss if I did not give a good shout out to Moses Aponte, our IT guy, for really working hard to get those Chromebooks in. And thank you, Vince and Lisa, for also assisting with that and getting the funds secured to get them. But Vince, if you could let Moses know that we certainly appreciate his hard work, and obviously he's here well beyond the school day. He's here tonight getting those Chromebooks and getting them ready for the 6th grade. So certainly, I know I speak for the board when I say we really appreciate that and his dedication to the district and his enthusiasm towards the district.
He's even doing a test on YouTube Live tonight. So.
Yeah. So that's great. So please give him a shout out.
I will. He actually sent me a text while we were speaking when Dr. Corey was here. He could read the BOCES budget over YouTube Live. He could actually zoom in and look at those.
Great.
Oh, that's
So we are, I meant to tell you, we are YouTube Live tonight. So.
Well, we're not actually live. We're actually we're going to be live. Yeah.
We're live.
We're live. So I need to correct you. So people on the outside can't watch this.
No, they can't even hear us. They can't even hear us. So I'm going to turn it over to Vince.
Thank you. After we're done with page 34, then I'll take a poll to see who's still alive. Because I'd like to go through the tax cap formula. I know it's very exciting. So I'll do this quickly, but I would be remiss if I didn't go through it for anyone who hasn't experienced this before. So please go to page 34, and here's how the tax cap formula works. I'd also like to reiterate, I haven't said this in many years, but the tax cap was touted as a 2% tax cap. It is not a 2% tax cap after I show you the math. So the very first line item there, line A, the letters are on the left side. That's what our last year's tax levy was. That's what we actually levied. And then there's a tax base growth factor that the state gives us, and that is how our community is growing. This year it's 1.0, the community hasn't had much growth. Multiply those two numbers, and that's what we start out with for our levy. Then what we do is we add in any pilots for the upcoming school year. A pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes. There's 5 of them listed there. And then letter F, you subtract the capital exclusions from last year, and I'll get to that further on down in the formula. So we're adding in the pilots, we're subtracting the capital exclusions, and we get the adjusted prior year levy, which is that $23,666,000 number. And here's where the 2% comes in. So it's CPI or 2%. Whichever is greater. So right now CPI is like 2.13%, but they're capping us at that 2%. So I take the prior year levy, multiply it by 1.02, or give it a 2% increase. And then what we do is we have to subtract out any pilots. So that's why you see there it says subtract it out. So we subtract out our pilots. We get our adjusted tax levy limit. So without any exclusions that we'll be able to add in, our tax levy would actually only be up 0.49%. That's letter L. But then what the state allows us to do is add in any exemptions. in the past, we've had a TRS exemption and ERS exemption. But typically for us, it's our capital local share. That's any building aid that's associated with any capital projects that we have, less any building aid we get. So that's the cost of our principal and our interest for putting up any buildings. So we get to add that back in, which gives us a 1.65% tax levy increase that's requiring a simple majority. If the board were to go beyond that number of 389,226 by a penny, that would require a supermajority. So that would mean 60% or more of the voters would have to approve the budget if you wanted to exceed that number by any amount of money. This formula is on our website. I will be submitting this to State Ed, to the Comptroller's Office. They don't get this form. There's also another page in your budget packet. That's the actual data. This is a good double check for my formulas. I enter that into the OSC's website to make sure that my numbers are correct. They populate a lot of the data from the prior years, and then also in your packet is the actual layman's terms of what the OSC says what a tax cap formula would look like.
So for everybody out there, we are under the tax cap for this year, correct?
We are at the tax cap.
At the tax cap, but
Right.
we're not over, is what I'm saying.
We are not over at this time, correct.
It's a simple majority of the voters of this district.
That's correct.
As it has been in the past.
That's correct. So as when Dr. Fogarty and Ms. Fogler Edwards were here earlier, we are actually pretty early finishing up our budget workshops. The special ed situation can and most likely will change. So as we get closer to the budget adoption date, any numbers that do change, whether I go back and look at some of the things that were brought up tonight, or students move in or students move out, annual reviews, I'll give you some final numbers. Probably the second meeting in March, we'll be close to saying, okay, we are where we are, let's go with it, and then we'll go ahead and adopt the budget.
So for the board, I just want to say that on March 13th, we will have a budget update at our meeting, our general meeting, and then we will have a full budget modifications, state, and all updates and tax implications on April 10th. So you may want to mark your calendars for that. Those are both at our meetings.
March 13th, April 10th.
Yes, March 13th and April 10th.
We should have state aid numbers by the 10th.
We should hopefully have our state aid numbers from the legislator by that date, so it'll give us a true representation of what our revenues look like. In your budget binders, there's the budget calendar that reflects those dates as well, except for the overview that we might offer, or that we are going to offer in March, but everything else that we just spoke about is in that budget calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Napoli.
You're welcome.
And that concludes everything we have for this evening. I will remind the board that our next regular meeting will be on February 27th. Dinner, executive session at 5. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned.